Nintendo's Shigeru Miyamoto once said, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." But lately, we've been seeing dozens of games be released in a state that makes players feel like they're unfinished on purpose. Whether that's due to a lack of polish, a lack of content, or a failure to deliver on what is promised from advertisements, player satisfaction has been dropping as a whole due to the shift of games from fully fleshed out, properly developed releases to them using the games as a service monetization model. This is where, instead of exclusively earning revenue through the sale of the game itself, there is additional content offered within the game that users can pay for, such as game subscriptions, microtransactions, or season passes and battle passes. This isn't a new concept, as even back in the mid-2000s, MMOs like World of Warcraft were using the games as a service model to create enough revenue to pay their employees and keep servers running using their subscriptions. The change we've seen recently, however, is that studios are turning games that we've always known as purchase and play style, or even free-to-play titles, into ones that require consistent payments to keep up or experience new content. And the players are the ones suffering for it, as it feels like we're paying full price for half a game. The causes for this shift encompass all parts of game development, and people aren't happy given the ways that titles like No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk 2077 performed on release. Diving a little deeper into the root of the issues can provide some insight into what is going on and what we can expect for the future of gaming. The biggest reason for the addition of more monetization options in modern video games is the sheer cost of developing new games. As gaming became more mainstream, competition was fierce to get ahead of everyone else, whether that was through better graphics, more unique concepts, or more engaging stories. Alongside these improvements, however, development got exponentially more expensive. The original Doom from 1993 only cost around a couple $100,000 to develop and release, while Doom Eternal was closer to $100 million, and that's not even including the marketing costs. More people are playing video games nowadays, so more copies will get sold, but that's 500 times more expensive than the original game, and the price of the game itself only went up by 50% from $40 in 1993 to $60 for Doom Eternal. Development teams have expanded. What used to be a handful of people is now hundreds or even thousands that all need to be paid salaries over what can sometimes be multiple years of work. Additional cash flow from DLCs or season passes can help offset some of these costs, and will usually earn the publisher profit on top of it. Creating the extra content must cost money too, right? I mean, someone has to program all the new areas, create new enemies, make the art, and determine what will go in the battle passes. The problem with this is that publishers have incentive to release unfinished games to cut corners and save on development costs as a whole. A game releasing with a quarter of it missing costs significantly less to create, and if the first few months following release show it not performing as well as they anticipated, they can cut the project and run with whatever money they had made so far. The issue with games as a service is that the studio has no obligation to continue providing service for a game that isn't performing up to par. The way that DLCs are typically handled, with each only being announced sometime after the previous one releases, means that players are left in the dark, and they can be abandoned at any time. A game that was meant to have 3 or 4 DLC releases to finish out the game could only have one actually come out, leaving the game literally unfinished. As it comes down to it, money is at the root of all evil yet again, and while it's not exclusively greed that causes these issues, as the studio's employees do need to be paid, it seemed that the studios caught wind of what was going on with the revenue streams mobile games were getting and wanted to get in on the action. Mobile games are absolutely packed to the brim with microtransactions, paid passes, and dozens of ways to suck your money directly out of your wallet, as I went over in a previous video, and they are currently one of the most profitable forms of games out there, earning over $77 billion in 2020 alone. That amount of money, along with the comparatively small development cost, is mind-boggling to think about. And traditional game studios took note of their success and tried to implement some of the same strategies. The problem is, most mobile games are either free-to-play or extremely inexpensive, justifying the paid content fleshing out the world a bit more. Nobody likes dropping $60 on a game just to find out you have to pay another $60 in DLC costs just to get the full experience, and that's where the traditional games are missing the mark. In some cases, the DLC or Day 1 patches are necessary, however, and that's due to development deadlines. The most notable example of deadlines harming the quality of a game is what happened with No Man's Sky's release back in 2016. Sony offered to pick up a small, independent studio with big dreams who wanted to release a game called No Man's Sky. The team had nobody in charge of PR, so the head of the studio just went and did interviews to hype up the game, discussing the features they wanted to implement and what to expect from the finished product. Unfortunately, the game had to be delayed once due to it being unfinished, and it should have been delayed many, many more times. But with Sony backing the studio, they wanted the game out immediately, and so it released with basically none of the features that had been promised in the interviews. The game crashed and burned with hundreds of thousands of negative reviews, angry customers, and it was panned by journalists for the low quality from a supposedly AAA title. It really wasn't the studio's fault, however, as if they had just had more time to work on the game, it would have easily lived up to expectations. After its release, they kept working on the game, with frequent updates and fully fleshed out changes, turning the game around from an absolute dumpster fire to a game that won multiple game awards. All of the updates were 100% free, showing that sometimes it's not just money that causes a game to be unfinished, but outside expectations as well. For the whole story on what happened with No Man's Sky, there's an awesome video from Internet Historian that explains exactly what went wrong with the title. The development deadline issue isn't completely avoidable, as we saw the same thing from Cyberpunk 2077 just recently, and they had a huge team. We can only hope that we'll see a similar turnaround with that title, and that we can be a little bit more understanding in the future when extremely hyped up games take a little longer than expected to release. So as we've seen, money is the main cause for most of the issues we're seeing with unfinished games nowadays. Who would have thought? Corporate greed is what's pushing this changing model of game, either through the requirement of paid DLC to recoup development costs, microtransactions to keep people paying without even thinking about it, or building up hype for a game and refusing to delay it for the health of the product just so they can get a faster turnaround on their profit. Now that studios have gotten a taste of the extra money that can come in through the use of alternate payment models, it won't be going away. So it may just be time to start expecting big titles to say they cost $60 when it's really more like $100 per game. It might hurt less. That's all I have for you guys though. Thank you much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you found this interesting, and I will catch you later.